This is the story of the 12 brothers and about how they were saved by their sister. It was a long time ago, and there was a king of a small country, and he and his wife, the queen, had 12 lovely sons, strong, charming, intelligent young men. And the queen was with child, and the king yearned more than anything else for a daughter. And he said to his wife, "If the child you are carrying is a girl, I will kill all 12 of our sons, so that the kingdom, the crown, or the land will all be inherited by our daughter." And he ordered that 12 little coffins were made, and in them he had placed a pillow and wood shavings, and he had them locked away in a room. And everyone was ordered never to unlock that room. And the queen wept inconsolably. And one day her youngest son asked, "Mother, why do you weep so much?" And the queen felt that she had to tell her youngest son that if the baby in her womb was a girl, then all 12 of the boys would be sacrificed purely for her benefit. And she took her son to the locked room, where there were 12 little coffins, each with a pillow and each filled with wood shavings. And her son believed her story. And he said, "Mother, we can escape from here." So it was agreed that all 12 of the brothers would leave the castle, and they would hide in the woods, and they would take it in turns to climb to the top of a very tall tree and keep watch, so that when the queen gave birth, if the baby was a boy, she would have a white flag raised, and they would be safe to return. But if the baby was a girl, she would have a red flag raised, so that they would know that there was danger in the castle and it was time to flee. So the 12 brothers agreed to this plan, and it wasn't long after that that the queen gave birth, and much to the king's delight, the baby was a girl, and a red flag was hoisted. And the 12 brothers, seeing the red flag, knew that they had to flee deeper into the forest. And the oldest brother said, "We have lost everything because of a girl. I think the first girl that we meet we should kill." And 11 of the brothers agreed to this, all except the youngest. So they continued their way deeper and deeper into the dark forest, and they found a little cottage that was empty. But what they didn't know, because they haven't actually read the rest of the Grimm's folk tales themselves, was that the cottage was bewitched and enchanted. So they settled down into hunting and growing vegetables, and it was quite a nice life. For every day the 11 oldest brothers would go out into the forest, and with their bows and arrows they would hunt deer and birds and hares. But the youngest brother would stay at home and skin and gut and cook and tend the vegetable garden. After a few years, the princess learned about her 12 brothers. She found 12 shirts and asked her mother who they belonged to. And her mother wept as she told the princess about her 12 older brothers and how they had had to escape into the forest. And so the princess, who felt that she was to blame for her brother's misfortune, declared that she would go into the forest, she would find them and she would rescue them. So she journeyed forth, and after some time she found the little cottage, and she knocked on the door, and as travellers do, asked for food and asked for shelter. And it was only her youngest brother who was there, for the 11 oldest brothers were out hunting. And she explained to him that she was a princess in search of her 12 brothers, and she showed him the 12 small shirts. And so her youngest brother knew that she spoke the truth, and he admired her beauty, and he admired the golden star that was on her forehead. So when the 11 older brothers came home, he told them the story and showed them their sister. And they settled down into a new life with their sister there, and they hunted, and they gathered nuts and berries, and they grew vegetables. And all was well, until one day the princess went out into the garden, and there she saw 12 white lilies. Thinking that they were so beautiful and thinking that they would make lovely presents for her brothers, she picked each of the 12 lilies. And in that moment, her brothers were turned into ravens. The garden and the cottage vanished, and the princess was left on her own, deep in the dark forest. And at this point, an old woman, leaning heavily on a walking stick, appeared before her and said, "Those 12 lilies that you plucked, they were your brothers. They have now been turned into ravens." And the princess was aghast and said, "But is there nothing I can do to turn them back to humans? They'll hate being ravens." And the old woman said, "There is a way to break the spell, but it is very hard. You must remain silent, not saying a word, and never laughing for 7 years. If you speak and there is so much as an hour left of the 7 years, your brothers will die." So the princess thought, that doesn't sound so hard. And she took a vow of silence. She climbed up a tree and made herself comfortable on a branch, took out her spindle and began to spin. And it just so happened that at this time a king was out hunting. And as he was hunting through the forest on his fine white horse, his hunting dog saw the princess and sat at the bottom of the tree and barked and barked. So The king saw the princess and saw her beauty and her long hair and the golden star on her forehead and fell instantly in love with her. He climbed the tree and carried her down and said, "Will you be my wife? I know I can never be happy without you." So the princess then nodded her agreement. They went back to the castle and settled down into married life, although the king sometimes wished that his wife would speak. But the king's mother, who was a woman of dark, evil intent, began to spread rumours about the young queen. Why does she not speak? What is it that she is hiding? Why does she never laugh? Years passed. 6 years and many months had passed. Almost 7 years had passed. And the evil of the king's mother had infected many people, had infected the king. And so he agreed to condemn his wife to death. A great bonfire was built outside the castle with a stake and with chains. And the queen was led to the fire, and the queen was chained to the stake. Time ticked on. The 7 years were almost at an end. The fire was lit. The flames began to lick upwards, closer and closer to the queen. The clock struck. A great whirring was heard in the air, and 7 ravens circled the burning fire. And at that moment, the 7 years came to an end. The ravens came down to earth, and as soon as their feet touched the ground, they turned back into their human shape. And there they were, the 12 brothers, the 12 princes. And the tale doesn't say that they were handsome, but I like to think that they were. And together they broke up the fire and rescued their sister. And now that she could speak again, she explained to her husband all that had happened. She explained that she was a princess, and that the ravens, who were now in human form, were princes, her brothers. And she explained all that she had endured to save them. And the king accepted her story and accepted her back into his arms and back into his heart. But as for his mother, she was placed in a barrel full of snakes. So she died a terrible death. That image of men getting turned into ravens, incidentally, are the largest members of the corvids, the crow family. We don't have them where I live in East Anglia. We have rooks and crows, but ravens apparently are the size of buzzards or even larger than buzzards. So they would be, they're always ill omen. In Game of Thrones, ravens are creatures of ill omen, and of course they do feed on corpses on battlefields. There is a folk song, Two Ravens, I think Twa Corbies, and do forgive my awful pronunciation in Scottish, eating eating a dead body. So people would have been turned into ravens. And it's an interesting image, isn't it? And it is I think it is an image of drawing people back from the other world. But there's lots of variations on that particular story. It's interesting that woodlands and forests are either places full of wolves and wild boar and outlaws, or they are places that you run to and places that you seek refuge in as you like it. Shakespeare talks about, oh, they're living like Robin Hood of old England, where of course the um, deposed Duke has sought refuge in the greenwood. Interesting one. I also tell stories of Robin Hood, and there is a Robin Hood's Merry Men Facebook group if you're interested. There is a Brothers Grimm Facebook group too, with if you'd like to chat about the stories of the Brothers Grimm. I'm sure psychologists could have a field day with the imagery of that story of being prepared to sacrifice one child so that another child may live. Maybe we don't feel too comfortable with that as a concept, but it's an interesting one because it's usually the other way round. It's usually daughters who are sacrificed in order to save their brothers. An amazing storyteller called Lynn Barber did the story of Asclepius and the Storeworm and the whole thing about sacrificing young women, and she put forward the idea that if there's a famine, and of course this is the background to a lot of the Grimm brothers stories, is famine, being short of food. If you have enough food to feed some of your children, parents apparently will usually feed their sons and let the daughters starve. I know that sounds horrible, but it's not a choice that we are likely to have to make, thankfully. Anyway, the story of the 12 brothers being turned into ravens. So lots more Brothers Grimm stories coming up. So I hope you'll enjoy them, and I hope they give you something to think about too. Hope to see you again. Take care.